Hey, this is Stuchu, and this time I am back with another episode of talking about Overwatch. I was actually thinking about renaming this, but there were like too. It would require too much knowledge about Overwatch because I was thinking about maybe I should call this Overwatch In and Out, but it's like then you'd have to know about the LA Valiant. It's like okay, what about Bump Watch or bumping the Overwatch? But then you have to know about the entire bumping thing. I was like but that's such a good title, kind of. But I probably have to write an apology or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah, donate $100 to the Anti-Bumping Foundation.
Yeah,
Check yourself into bumping rehab.
yeah.
Yeah,
The bully seminar for bumping.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Cloud9 back in the day. Now, reason I decided to do this is because not many people I know talk about Overwatch except for people within Overwatch, and Volamel is among the very best. And
Thank
all the other content creators have basically become analysts or coaches. So you are like you're one of the last survivors. So
you. Last of
congratulations.
the breed. Yeah.
Yeah. Until somebody needs to hire you out. We'll see if that ever happens.
Maybe we'll see.
Could happen. Plenty of teams.
Yeah.
And if Shanghai needs somebody, they can hire me because I don't know about
There you go.
Overwatch, but you guys don't know about Overwatch. I think it's a match made in heaven.
It's both a learning experience.
Yeah, I think we will both do very well in that situation. Just saying, if you want to throw for your money, I'm down for it. Now,
Yeah.
let's talk about stage two because stage two has ended, so we are halfway through the league, and this is an important part because basically, and I agree with Yiska because Yiska basically says it takes about 2 to 3 months to form a team. Except if you're Korean, obviously. Like, there's a reason the Koreans are so great. But for every other team, every mixed team or every straight up Western team, every national team takes some time. And basically, stage three, stage four, that's going to be over within 2 months. So any team that hasn't gotten it together by this point is basically done or dead. And they have to basically focus on building up for the next season, which I have no clue when it is. I assume it's going to be next year, but maybe they want to do 2 seasons. Who knows?
Yeah, it's up in the air.
Yeah, who knows? Now, where do you want to start? Because we can go from bottom up or top down.
Let's do top down.
All right, so start with the playoffs then. New York Excelsior, they finally didn't choke. I was actually almost certain they were going to choke. I was like, oh my god, they're going to do it. They're going to fulfill the storyline of LW Blue and do right by their ancestry, do right by what they stood for, but they somehow made it work. They somehow pulled it together.
They definitely pulled it out. Coming into that match with versus NYXL, we all were kind of sitting there watching, and we're like, did NYXL even like practice for this team, or did Philly even invest any time into practicing against NYXL, or did they all in London? Like it was really hard to tell, but Carpe played out of his gourd to pull that team into that playoffs.
Actually, I was going to say, I don't know if I said on Twitter, but basically I actually think Carpe is the best player of this stage.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
And then the runner-up isn't even the playoffs. It's Fisher.
Yeah, Fisher has made such a huge impact on that team.
Yeah.
Obviously, not to get off subject, but Philadelphia all in on Carpe. They gave him the ball and let him rock on that court, and he did exactly that. Like, one in particular play that really stood out to me was on their, I think it was Route 66, NYXL played Orisa.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there and we're thinking, I'm like, somebody in the chat was like, yeah, I don't think that this is actually really smart by NYXL because they don't really have shield bust. They don't really have anything to like break through the shield. And we're all like, I wonder what they're going to do. So what they do is they just run Carpe in the flank.
Yeah.
And he just gets 2 headshots randomly. I'm like, okay, well, that you don't need shield, break when you just kill 2 people for free. So there's that. And that was a consistent theme throughout the entire match, that he just did what he needed to do at the exact moment that he needed to do it and just went absolutely ham.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually use a lot of like different analogies. Sometimes I use sports analogies. Sometimes I use other game analogies. This one I'm going to go for Dota 2. I don't know if you ever watched it.
Not at all.
Okay, I'll explain the context. Basically, it's a 5v5 game. And like Overwatch or like League of Legends, there are specific rules. Of course, in Dota 2, there's like a bunch of weird caveats I'm not going to go into. But basically, it's like goes from 1 through 5. 1 being the guy who gets the most resources, like literally they get the most gold, and then they get the most items, and then they are supposed to be doing damage, supposed to be cleaning up the game, right? And thus, they are known as the carry player or the super carry player, whatever it is. And then it goes down by resources from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 5 being the least amount, right?
Right.
And so the Chinese, aeons ago, realized something. They realized, wait, what if we don't just give the one, like the most resource? What if we give them like all of the resources? Like literally everything. Everything. And so basically the strategy's formed. It's called 4 Protect 1, where literally all 4 of them die on the altar for this one man. And this one man will carry the entire game on his back once he is finished farming. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is actually how Philadelphia played Stage 1, except they used Shadowburn as their one man. And this time, they've actually realized, wait, what if we get an even greater player into that Shadowburn role, and then now you have Carpe. And that's literally what I think when I watch Philadelphia Fusion, is like they're all like setting up for this one man to carry them on his back, and he has done it.
It's funny that you mentioned that because speaking to that, again, on the Route 66, we saw somebody who we don't normally see. We saw Snillo being subbed in for EQO. And, again, we were all like, why don't they want to win? What are they doing? Like, this can't be good. Like,
it worked,
just
though.
Kind of, it did, exactly. And the reason why I think it did work is because it freed up Carpe to do what he did and really freed him up to play the Widowmaker, to play the McCree, even be able, we could see him play Soldier in potentially some other hit scan in the future. It's it's up in the air, but I think that analogy is spot on because it is kind of very centric around Carpe and letting him do exactly what he needs to do at the moment. And I feel like on that route, I guess their game plan was to just all in on him getting crazy headshots on Widowmaker. And
it's not a bad plan.
It's not at all.
Right? Like if that, because if you think about the way the New York Excelsior versus Philly Fusion roster works, like man for man, New York Excelsior should be better than almost every position except for Carpe's position.
Yep.
Basically. And so if you just all in on that one man, he will get you something, maybe. Right? It's like, I think
there's a ton of potential there.
Yeah. Right? So basically, yeah, Carpe was a fucking killer. And speaking of people he killed, London Spitfire, what do you think of that? Same day.
So
right?
Same day, and it's funny because, Philly couldn't have predicted it. I mean, I know that during the halftime they said that, if we won 2 games, going into game 3, we were going to 3-1 London, and they were really excited. I don't know exactly how much truth there is to that. Maybe they were very confident in this. With their play style, it would lead me to believe that they could have been. I mean, their play style was legitimately to remove their S key off their keyboard and held their sticks forward because they felt like they couldn't lose. They are the mono red aggro deck in this game.
Yeah.
They only go forward. They have haste, they have charge, whatever you want to call it, whatever game you play, they go in and they don't come out.
Yeah. Cavemen, so to speak.
Yeah, it is very one-dimensional, but it definitely catches a lot of people off guard because it throws them off of the kind of mechanical nature that games tend to have, where it's like, okay, you take your turn, I take my turn, but if you're always taking a turn, that doesn't really work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what Philly did really well, but I think that leads you to being very fatigued at a certain point because
it's so high. It's so high paced.
Yeah. It is very, very high tempo. Not only that, but you're coming off an adrenaline high after beating London. And then you go into the New York game, and then I feel like at halftime they just kind of
ran out of steam, right? Like actually, I think the halftime actually killed them. It's not the it's not the extra games, it's the extra halftime because like if you
just gotta sit there and wait.
Yeah, basically, if you talk to any like FGC player, and I'm bringing this up because basically these guys they go to weekenders and. These weekenders are straight up old school open bracket. Literally anybody's allowed to play. You get no special treatment beyond the good seed. That's all you get. Yeah. So basically, you're playing 8 hours a day for 8 to 12 hours a day for 2 days in a row, and then you play the final day. And so what happens is during the final day, like if you get knocked out early into the losers bracket, you can kind of like run up a very fast tempo all the way to the top and take out the top guy, because the top guy, even though he has a shorter route, like he cools down a lot. And so if you talk to like these Dota 2 guys, these FGC guys, CSGO guys, the problem with the amount of games isn't the amount of games. It's when you come down from the high, you can't get it back again, basically.
Exactly. You just run completely out of steam, and you're almost like, yo, let's go. Can we cut this like halftime and half? Like, I need to keep going.
Yeah. It's hard to keep that
outside
focus. Very hard.
Definitely.
Yeah. And if you think about, all right, this is another tangent because this is actually pretty funny. I forget who it was. There's certainly a football player who said this, but basically his strategy was it's hard to throw the ball when you know a guy's going to keep running after you over and over and over and over and over.
I think it was Marshawn.
It's Marshawn, right?
Yeah.
That's actually a very similar like strategy I've seen like Dota 2 for like some of the super aggressive teams where it's like it's not that we're good. It's just that eventually they're bound to break under the pressure because that kind of style is it puts you under the pressure.
And that's again, it's very analogous to Philly, where they're legitimately trying to create the most hectic situation possible because you can't have all the answers there. They don't have all the answers, but they're not trying to answer the question. They're just posing as many questions as possible. Yeah. And then you just let Carpe work. Fraggy goes in, they know he's going to die. They plan on him dying, and Carpe has all the space in the world. Not only does Carpe have all the space, but Boombox doesn't have to get pressured by a lot of people. If you look at Nepal Shrine, I think, Boombox showed up in a big way. Yeah. Not only that, but again, look at how Philly plays the game. They dive in, they kind of play around this giant amount of space that Fraggy creates them. Yeah. And it's very easy for Prophet to kind of get picked off. And statistically speaking, at least from looking at Winston's lab, I think Prophet has had the worst game he's ever had, and he's rated very low in that game. Yeah. Which is surprising because he was probably one of my candidates for player of the stage. Yeah. But he just was absent in the playoffs.
Yeah. And then when you talk, this is actually Philly's a very interesting sort of team because first off, like there's this narrative, and it's kind of true. Basically, it's like a team that can kill anybody, but a team that can also lose to anybody. And that's just like when you play this kind of style, it has high variance. But my God, if you show up on that day, it is destructive.
Very.
Right, it is destructive, and I do love the fact that basically the way the team worked, it works off, like I said, on a 4-protect-1, but it also works because like Fraggy is not a coward.
No, not at all.
Not a coward. He goes in, and it just happens he happens to have like a carry player who can use that space very well. So I think like even though we talk a lot about like tank synergy or like backline synergy or DPS synergy, like tank to DPS synergy is also very important. And even though like they don't necessarily work together, Fraggy and Carpe do work well together.
They work well in terms of styles, but it is Carpe for sure. But then you have threats coming legitimately from everywhere else. Like Boombox was like the original Jonak, right? He was right clicking people before Jonak was.
And he's still doing it. It's just not as good as Jonak. But it's still good, right?
Definitely not as good as Jonak, but. He showed up. I was questioning coming into the playoffs. I'm like, where's Boombox been? I kind of miss him just holding corners and playing angles, kind of like an Opera would. But then you've got Neptuno, which I think a lot of people sleep on, and just the kind of definitely he pull up like if you pay attention to like some of like the mid match or the transition into the next match, they show some like interesting stat cards. And one of them that really kind of stood out to me was Neptuno compared to Nuss or compared to Arc in certain maps. But I think on Nepal, Neptuno had 17 kills compared to like Nuss's 7. So you really get to see that difference between Nuss's like kind of passive, more defensive play, and Neptuno just filing in with the boys, just going in and just playing super aggressively and just collecting a lot of frags that I think a lot of teams aren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah, and not getting either. Like straight up, like those extra frags could just mean like the difference between a win or a loss, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And like even though like talking about like 4 protect 1, it's not like EQO or Snillo are doing nothing when they're
No,
put
they're
in,
they're
right?
definitely still
They're
they're pulling their weight, but they're also creating enough space to let the star work.
yeah, like they're like secondary, like everybody's like a secondary or tertiary threat, but
Mm-hmm.
the way it works, it's like Carpe is obviously the primary guy,
Yes.
and nobody can get to him because like there's all this other shit going down.
Exactly.
Right? It's actually a very fun team to watch, very chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually how I would have hoped a Chinese team would have played, but instead we got,
Yeah.
them.
Then you got Shanghai.
Shanghai.
God bless.
But so, all right. Is there anything else you want to talk about New York Excelsior? Obviously, they did win the entire thing. They're just not as interesting as Philly because they're like Philly's fucking crazy.
Well, they are interesting, but for less fun reasons. Right?
Yeah, right. Basically, like it feels like they're more polished than they were the stage before. Like stage before is like it really felt like that thing was like they had the best players, they didn't have that great teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
This one's like, oh, they have both now. It's like, oh, god damn it. Where's your weakness? Where's your weakness, Clark Kent? Get me that kryptonite. It's much more interesting that way.
The only thing that I would say now, because they've kind of checked off 2 big boxes for me, their tank DPS energy is much, much better. Mono and Sabiolbi and Giannis and Sabiolbi, much, much more in sync, much more in tune with their dives.
Yeah.
But not only that, you see the ult management coming out of the support line much cleaner. They've definitely improved on that, especially leading into the playoffs. Will that consistently stay kind of mended? I would hope so. That's really going to make this team like an incredible seasonal threat.
Mm-hmm.
But the only big like potential break I would see that anybody else has to kind of overtake them are 2 things.
Yeah.
One being coming into stage 3, we don't know exactly how the meta is going to shape out. We have seen some changes in the support meta where teams are starting to run a little bit less of the Lucio Zen backline, and they're starting to dabble a little bit more with something a little bit more slower paced with Moira, Mercy. We're starting to see even Mercy kind of peppered in even more now. We thought she was dead, but she's actually in a really good state.
I mean, she can resurrect herself, so you can't really truly kill her.
But she we'll see what happens with the support meta if Zen is still the big threat. I mean, we still do see some teams still run the Lucio Zen, but it is in that high dive kind of high tempo meta game. So we'll see if New York has that luxury to keep Jonek on the Zenyatta pick. We have seen him play other things. They look great, but we need to see him play like the 12 hours that he has on Zen at that same level with these other heroes. Another thing is
like his Roadhog.
Exactly. His Roadhog was absolutely nuts. His Ana looks great, but his Ana's only had 2 hours of play. I need that. That breadth.
You need the confirmation,
time.
Basically.
Exactly. Yes, I've seen the highlights. They look great, but I want to see like against the top teams and what they look like. So we'll see. But the other thing is, again, New York stylistically does play around a few people. They tend to play around Sabiolbi and they tend to play around Jonek. So if anybody's really gonna like pick them apart, it's probably gonna be in those areas. And I think that they need to figure out what their situation is with the tank line, because it seems like Mono and Giannis get kind of put in strange times, and I've heard some interesting things where a few people think that Giannis is a little bit more scary and he's kind of a little bit more unpredictable to play against. So we'll see, but those are kind of just my thoughts on New York right now leading into stage 3.
All right, and I guess there's 2 more things I'll talk about for New York. First is Libero is actually way better in stage 2 than stage 1. I think
Definitely
leveled up a lot. This is like the Meta Athena version of Libero. Like, wow,
he's coming back. He's coming
back to the soul Libero, back to the one where Libero loved Libero, kind of, right? And this guy, he whooped everybody, like every hero he picked. Basically, it's kind of disgusting.
Yeah, when you have someone able to play like 12 heroes at like a top level, like that's invaluable. I mean, specifically like. Look at the Hanzo pick. Nobody else is running Hanzo. Like you see it peppered in every once in a while, but they have a Hanamura strategy to attack point A specifically with Hanzo that I don't think anybody else ever will run, because I don't think anybody has that level of Hanzo play yet. I think that maybe Dallas could run it. Maybe Houston could potentially run it, but
Mhm.
even then, I don't know if they're at the same level as Libero with the same amount of flexibility. Like the kid is like
Like
worth his weight in gold.
yeah, basically like there are certain players in other like games that are kind of similar to Overwatch where they have like a player with ridiculously high flexibility. But
Mm-hmm.
like if you're talking about somebody with high flexibility and that godlike, you start running out of names real fast.
Yeah,
Like liberals definitely up there, and then there's like obviously like Faker or
definitely.
Infiltration when he played Street Fighter 4 basically used
Mm-hmm.
like 30 characters and won championships with like 10 of them. So there's like it's pretty like basically that's where like Libero's at, and he's not even like the star of his team. It's Jonak and Sabiobi, so it's a pretty disgusting team. And speaking of disgusting, Flower is still back there, ain't he?
Yeah, he's waiting. I'm sure he'll get his call up, which is, terrifying to think about that you're going to have two incredibly flexible players. The only thing I would say about Libero is that, in the regular season, he
Mm-hmm.
did look a little bit middling. He did look a little average, and they were kind of relying on him to be that flex player to kind of set up Sabiolbi and Jonak to kind of succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that's off of the kind of Pine situation that they've been facing. So they kind of were throwing him in where maybe he wasn't prepared to play a lot of these heroes, but
Yeah.
he peaked immensely in the playoffs. So I guess it worked out for them in the end for sure.
Yeah. And then I don't know where the fuck Pine is. They've basically given him up on Ilios. They're like, listen, Pine, you did great stage one.
Yeah,
We don't
stage
need
one was
you.
great, but
We
nah.
don't need you, and you're not going anywhere because we saw what happened to Fisher. You're just gonna stay right here. So yeah, that's basically what's
That's Pine in
happened to
a nutshell.
Pine as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I do have a question though. Why is Flower on this XL2 Academy team? Because it feels like he can fuck around with his contract if you put him there.
That was something that I did kind of think about, and I don't know if it was, and again, this is just pure speculation on my end, but I don't know if they weren't like strong armed by Blizzard and saying like, look, we know what you're doing with like Flower. We know, you haven't necessarily signed him to a contract or something along those lines. So we're going to need you to like, kind of pick up the pace and make a decision on what you're doing with him and not just kind of purposefully drag your feet in the mud. Because the big thing that I think Harsh actually hit on the head was that once you have him in the contenders team, that opens him up for discussion for Overwatch League teams.
Yeah.
And if you don't have him on the team, then he doesn't ever have to get approached and they have to go through the front office.
Yeah.
They still do now, but you know how that goes in esports where that doesn't necessarily always happen. People talk, what they say is, their business, but it is a little strange that now they decide to add him to the roster and not earlier, which is, again, who knows why that happened. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I don't think he's going anywhere though, because again, at the end of the day, it's up to the player's decision unless he's offered like ludicrous amounts of money. But even then, I don't think you're leaving one of the best teams in the world.
It would have to be ludicrous amounts of money, and it would have to be one of the better teams.
Mm-hmm.
And
like London, like Jack would have to come up with like a briefcase full of like $100,
Yeah.
like not $100, but like $100 million, and
in
try to buy him
yeah,
out.
I don't think there's much point for him doing it, at least for now.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Like Flower is like, he is the hidden like trump card of the
Mhm.
entire Overwatch League. It feels like so.
Definitely.
Well, I guess you will see whenever he comes of age.
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch is kind of weird like that, where we're just waiting around for people to come of age, and I think it'll always be like that because it feels like a lot of the young esports players are like the better ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're putting at the minimum at 18, you're not going to get like a Flash or Life or any of those guys.
Nope. Sadly.
Yeah, it's too bad, but like, what can you do for now?
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of a dead Korean team, actually, that's a terrible transition, but I don't give a fuck. Seoul Dynasty has fucked it up. They have brung shame onto the nation of Korea. I'm sure London and New York were loving it. Philly was like, "This is how we do it," and then Dynasty. What do you think of Dynasty?
So, and this is something that I'm kind of needing to finish. I started the research not too long ago, but I have a kind of a long form synopsis and diagnosis for Seoul. And one of the big things, or one of the two big things I would say, not to give everything away, but they definitely have tank issues in
Yes.
terms of just what resources and how they're using their resources.
Mm-hmm.
Miro, specifically looking at Winston's lab statistics, because that's the only statistics I have available. Um,
Shout
he
out to
has
Blizzard.
some of, yes, of course. He has some of the worst ultimate efficiency, and basically how they calculate that is the amount of times you use your ult and win a fight, and then over the times that you don't use your ult and you know those fights. So the
Mm-hmm.
total fights over the times you use fights, if I'm understanding that correctly. Again, I don't know the back end,
Mm-hmm.
you know, arithmetic that goes on, but from the most part, I think that's how that works. And he has, you know, very questionable like ratios in that sense. So it's, and it shows in the play, you know, his primal rage compared to Gesture or Fissure or even Giannis or Miro, like, or I'm sorry, not Miro, Mono.
But
They're
also old
just
Miro.
exactly, yeah. I don't know if it's the meta game that's played or plagued him, but it's not good. That the synergy with the dive, Munchkin and Miro are not on the same page
Mm-hmm.
pretty much at all. And then you have to wonder about Jaehong. You know, I like Jaehong. I want him to stay around, but I don't know if that's necessarily best for the team. You know, as a fan, I would love Jaehong to stay and you know play until he's 40 like he wants to. But if we're looking at the team's health and you know why they're missing two stage playoffs when they're supposed to be, you know, some of the best players in the world, you have to look at, you know, his Zenyatta performance, and it just isn't up to par for being a world class team. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if he's even top 5 in the world as Zenyatta. Is his Ana great? Yeah, but I just
Does
don't know
Ana
why.
exist? Not really.
Not really. That's the sad part. I think they could make a strategy work with him on Ana, but it would require a whole restructuring of how that team works. And again, that would kind of leave them open to a lot of. It makes them very colorful, makes them their style very clear. If they do kind of want to ignore the meta around Zenyatta and play him on an Ana,
But
his Ana's great, but I don't know if it's up to par.
basically, the rest of them is not up to par. And I actually don't know how this team is structured in terms of like captain or strong
Mm-hmm.
voices, but it always felt like Lee Jae Hong was also the captain of this team.
Yeah, it's basically from my understanding, it's him and Toby kind of leading communication, and then if Kuki gets subbed in as another tank,
Yeah.
he kind of brings another vocal presence. But basically, it's those two. So you don't even really want to sub that out. But there again, they did sign Gambler. If they can plug and play Gambler without any complications, I think that could be pretty interesting. Looking at some other tank, not necessarily tank compositions, but just compositions in general for that backline that they could run.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gambler has been pretty good at Mercy. I think his Lucio's up to par, so he could, you know, relieve Toby to play something else if he needs to. So we'll see. I think they've known about this for a while, and I think that's the reason why they got Gambler, just to kind of fill out that role, especially coming from stage 1.
All right. Now we'll go to the fifth team, the team that could have got to the playoffs if
Mm-hmm.
only they weren't fans of LA Valiant. But to be fair, Philly did get revenge for Fisher, so all is well in the world. Basically, LA Gladiators, a team that was about to die after
Yeah.
at the end of stage 1. I'll go ahead and say it. Like I think we were all thinking it. This team is like literally on the edge of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
But they got the greatest tank in the world, possibly.
Definitely.
Fisher, right?
Fisher comes in and just rebuilds this team. Not only does he come in with a very strong presence and some incredible game knowledge, but he comes in as, like you said, one of the best tank players in the world. And I think that was the kind of theme for me for stage 2 towards the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, you can look at the Zenyatta kind of centric meta. You can look at how dominant Widow has been, but I think that not the overperformance, but the abuse of just like really good tank players compared to like just really uncoordinated teams has been very apparent. Like look at Gesture. I think Muma has actually kind of
Mm-hmm.
turned it around towards the end of stage 2. Again, coming in from stage 1 and even outside of that, being one of the better tank players in the world. Gesture Fissure, again, probably the duo to kind of beat in terms of top spots and in terms of just overall tank play.
Mm-hmm.
But they're the punishers. They just kind of just run you over and they punish every move that they can.
Yeah.
feasibly do. So that was kind of my theme for this whole event, was just dominant tank play, and you got to hats off to Fissure for really turning it around. Not only that, but there's definitely been rumors going around that Void's going to be signed, and we've had that confirmed recently. Now that he has his old sub tank player, that's giving him like even more like much more firepower in terms of just being able to dive more efficiently. Like I had mentioned before, him and Void played on, I believe, Kongu Panthera way back in the day in the Apex era. So you're giving him another player that has already like pre-established synergy. You plug him in, as long as it, you know, incorporates well enough. I think that team's going to be very, very scary, barring any other moves that they possibly could make. You know, it's not out of the possibility that they sign another DPS player or
support.
I guess you could sign a support. I don't know why you would. I think you have two very, very strong backliners.
See, you're thinking like that because you're assuming in your mind, and this is like something weird. I guess this is like one of the theoretical questions. I guess is basically nobody seems to understand this in Overwatch, but form disappears. Like form literally disappears overnight, and nobody can explain why. Sometimes, right?
That's true.
Like it's easier to like escape. It's easier to like mask it in Overwatch because there are 6 players, even more than 5. Then there's like the patch changes and like the meta changes, but basically, no matter what player you're talking about, eventually they're gonna go down. Like, and so that's actually why I think it might very well be possible. It's like a support player's coming in because listen,
you're gonna need somebody to fill that out.
They're both good. I'm not saying they're bad at all, but what if they fall down? You're fucked because there's no other support player.
You legitimately don't have anybody else unless you put, you know, hydration on Lucio, I suppose. But even then, you're kind of sacrificing that there. But yeah, I could see some not necessarily substitutions, but filling out that backline a little bit more. Yeah, I think.
And like to if you want to like ease the egos a little bit, just don't get a star support player. Just get like
get somebody who's hungry.
Yeah, get somebody who's up and coming. Just teach them a little bit, just in case.
Yeah.
Right, I don't think that's a problem, right? But
not at all. I mean, look at Moth. You know, he comes into San Francisco, big upgrade. Nobody's really even heard of him. I think he was playing on Boston Academy at the time, and you know, got bought out. But he's definitely having some great performances on San Fran and building them up. So who's to say that LA can't do the same thing?
Yeah. Shout out to contenders. Apparently, like one team owns like 8 of them. So I forget which one, GGEA or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so talk to them. I'm sure they have somebody to sell you. All right. And now we go down to 6th place, Boston Uprising. And there's some weird ass shit going on with this team. I don't even know what's going on. You want to explain it to me? Because I can't explain it.
I guess there's rumors that the team's going in, you know, inner turmoil. There's you know, conflicting opinions on exactly what's going on. You've got a bench roster that, you know, hasn't seen scrim time and from what I understand, like quite a while.
Gamsu taking a vacation.
Gamsu just leaves mid-season and then comes back and they still look fine. I think that this team actually could have, if there was no weird the drama or Gamsu getting sick and having to fly Korea, whatever kind of story that was. But if this team actually stuck it out through the entirety of stage 2, I think they actually could have contested for the last playoff spot, or at least like played spoiler for it. They look really good. I've been pretty impressed with their rotations overall and their kind of snap decision making. Yeah. But outside of that, they just gotta solve whatever's ailing them in terms of just like internal BS, because it's kind of a disservice, because I think they actually could be a very, very good team, but it's just the little things that are holding them back, like the internal stuff. So I think that if they solve that, maybe they get new players, maybe you know they cut some of the bad seeds, but I don't know. We'll see, I guess, what happens in stage 3, but it's kind of sad.
Yeah. Speaking of a team that has no internal turmoil but does need a tracer player, probably Outlaws.
Yeah, Outlaws. They've kind of turned it around. They're another team that I think has a lot of potential to be very stylistic. Coming into the next meta, I think that they don't necessarily have to have a tracer. Again, I think that's a very easy out to look at, like the pick rates and, you know, how dominant somebody like Sabielby or Prophet is, and look and be like, okay, this is working. This is a style that's working. So why don't you just do that? I think there's a lot more nuance to it than that.
Yeah.
I think the team overall, and they've been pretty vocal about it being, we're not entirely too sure exactly what we want to do with Tracer. So I think in that sense, if you don't really know what to do with Tracer in the meantime, just kind of create something that's working for you right now. And we started to see that towards the end, and kind of seeing Houston have that uptick.
Yes,
And
they have Linkster play Tracer. I remember.
well, yeah, that.
Good Tracer player
But
too,
even
apparently.
I mean, he's another one of those kids that just plays a ton of different stuff, and it's always at a high level.
Yeah.
But there again, I don't know that this team's necessarily suited for Tracer just yet. They seem kind of wishy-washy on exactly what they want to do with, overall strategies and how they want to make that work and kind of getting that synergy built up. I mean, look at Clockwork. I think Miaska and one of the guys from Winston's Lab, Broy, we did a couple of VOD reviews of exactly how Clockwork plays, and he's just very passive, and they kind of have him running like a very one-dimensional style of Tracer just to kind of build that synergy and that kind of understanding up in the team, I think. But I think towards the end of stage 2 we saw them on an uptick, playing their own kind of style, like kind of forcing the Junkrat a little bit. Again, we don't normally see Junkrat on Hanum or a B, but they pulled it against Seoul and it worked very, very well, and Seoul really didn't have an answer to it. So I think that kind of showed them, and it kind of proved them that you can be stylistic and still play this game and do very well. So I think that they don't necessarily have to conform just yet, but if there's a Tracer meta that's dominant, you probably are going to need a Tracer player. So we'll see what happens coming into stage 3 and maybe even season 2 in terms of like who they sign or if they sign anybody.
All right. Should I do it? I guess I'll do it now. So here's a theoretical question, because basically it feels like from the outside, I'm watching this Overwatch League, it feels like everybody's all happy and hunky-dory and shit, right? Now, here's the problem with that is basically at some point you're going to level off. And once you level off, I think you as a team need to go higher, basically. And it feels like because the Koreans exist, like I'm not sure if there's some kind of weird mental like ceiling in their minds, but they think, oh, this is good enough because I'm like among the best of the other teams that are on Korean. But in my mind, I'm thinking, no, that is enough. You want the guy you need to beat next. It has to be the Korean team.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm thinking, and that's why I said you have to get a Tracer. It doesn't really matter.
No, definitely.
Because what's going to happen is, even if you don't use it, you're going to learn from it, or it'll at least give you an extra option, an extra threat, or whatever it is. Because when you look at like the Outlaws, they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, definitely. It'll kind of keep them meta resistant, right? And I think that's been the kind of theme overall, that one meta a team can be really great, and then a patch hits and they're just completely garbage. Now with the infrastructure and the kind of money that these teams have, I think that it is worth your weight in gold to kind of pick up at least somebody who's able to flex onto this role, even in like not a shallow way, but at least that they have somebody to play it. Look at Philly. They have Snillo. We haven't really seen Snillo play anything else but Tracer, and he frees up Carpe to do everything. And that could be the same thing with Linkser. He's the kind of flex player. He kind of can flex, but he's also the carry. So it is strange exactly how that dynamic lines up. But yeah, no, I completely agree. They should get a Tracer player and try to incorporate him within the team as best as they can, because it is going to pay off in the future for sure. Because I don't think Tracer's going anywhere anytime soon. She's been pretty dominant for a while.
She's on the fucking logo of the league.
Yeah, exactly. You can't nerf her.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, I think it's not just applicable to Outlaws, but it's applicable to a lot of people, a lot of these Western teams in a sense. So it's kind of weird in my opinion. Actually, applicable to Seoul Dynasty as well.
Yes.
Basically, like if you're not in like contention for winning, you have to be improving your roster or improving something. Right? That's just how I see it.
No, I think you're spot on, because there's a lot of players on these rosters that you start to question. I mean, Seoul in particular, like Zephyr, it's like you have one of the best flex tank players in the world, and then you have Zephyr, and it's like, okay, yeah, Zunba could have like an off day, maybe he could be ill, maybe he could be injured. I guess that's fine. Maybe you put in Zephyr, but there hasn't been much, nuance to when they play Zephyr or how, or if he's even seeing scrim time. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information, but I can't imagine that he is, especially with Seoul trying to, make stage playoffs. So I think that Simba's probably getting a lot of that playoff time or, practice time. But yeah, I think that a team like Seoul, a team like Dallas, Philly, they need to not okay. I didn't mean Philly. I actually meant San Francisco.
Philly's doing fine. They're actually getting.
Philly's doing fine.
They somehow tricked London into thinking, "Don't worry, we're terrible. Just give us Fisher. You are terrible. Here's Fisher."
Yeah.
Oh fuck. Like that's how that conversation went down in my mind. Right. Oh, also, this is a funny side story, but basically, all pro players in Overwatch League, you have to watch the fuck out when you're eating meals. I'm just telling you now. Go to In-N-Out. You don't want to get in that car with Noah Winston. You're eating your meal. You're eating your meal, and then London comes out and says, "Get the fuck out in 3 hours." You're going to LA Gladiators. Like what? Like, I'm just saying, it's just like Dota 2. Don't watch out for that pizza before you get kicked. Shout out to Ohio getting kicked from Fnatic at a pizza party, but just watch out, man. I'm just here to help you guys out a little bit. Like eat your meals in privacy where nobody can get to you, and then you might make it awkward enough that they don't want to kick you. This has actually happened in some teams sometimes, where it's so socially awkward where it's like, you guys are gonna kick me? No, man, no, man, and then they completely reverse their decision. So I'm just saying, you could maybe, if you can do it that way, maybe it'll help your careers, but it'll probably screw over your teams. Now, speaking of people that do not want to fester and die away, there is Valiant, who, besides doing that amazing In-N-Out documentary, has, and it is amazing. Basically, I know everybody on Reddit thinks, "Oh, that's so trash. That is so dramatic." But think about it. That's the only one you guys are talking about. It has become a living meme. So it's in fact the best, most successful documentary of the Overwatch League somehow.
Definitely.
Right? So
it's very similar to the old like TSM Legends, where they sit Cax down and they're like, "Look, we got to bench you," and there's tears and there's drama and it blows up on Reddit, and they're just kind of pushing the boundaries, and I can't necessarily blame them for it. It's great publicity.
Yeah. So it worked out for them.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're blowing up at each other online through Discord, through articles, but we'll get to that later. So there is LA Valiant. Now this is a team you told me you were thinking they were gonna rise up, and to be fair, they were one of the best teams in stage 1, but time changes, metas change.
Yes.
So what has happened to them since?
I think they've gone just under some serious restructuring. We've seen Kareev come from, a flex support. Now he's playing DPS, and now he's flexing back to support, and they're bringing agilities in halfway through the stage. And I don't know that they know exactly what they want to do. And now there's a report, coming around that they're trading players, and I think they're still trying to figure it out. Could they be good come stage 3, depending on the meta? It's possible.
All right.
I'm still not even entirely too sure exactly what North America and these North American teams want to run in terms of this. I mean, we've looked at Korea because Contenders is playing on the patch that I assume they will be playing in stage 3. And you look at the different pick rates, and you see Sombra is very, very heavily played in Korea, but not so much in terms of North America and Europe. So I don't know exactly what kind of parity we're going to see there. But it's possible they have a quite a deep bench, but we've never seen their bench. That's the kind of questionable part. Do they restructure the bench? Do they kind of resurface the sister team and maybe play against that? It's hard to tell, but as of stage 2, yeah, I feel like it was just structural issues and trying to iron out some problems, and then getting in new coaches, and yeah, it was just overall kind of strange.
Yeah, basically there was a documentary with Moon, I think is the coach, basically saying like he came into this team, realized there was actually 2 teams, not just 1 team. It's like, oh, that's a harsh indictment, but it's better than having 2 teams than having no team. Shout out to Fuel.
Yeah.
But basically there is here's a question.
Okay.
Basically you have Soon and Unko, and now I'm not one to bring up the past, but sometimes you have to go to the past. And there was this amazing team. I'm not sure if you've heard of them because they were before the Overwatch League. They were known as Rogue,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best Western teams that didn't exist in Overwatch history, or did exist. Depends who you're talking to.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, here's my point: is basically because you already have 2 of the 6 original members, and you can, of course, always add on members. Is it time? Because I think they're the only team that can do it. Basically, you can hit the emergency button and say, "Fuck it, we are time traveling back, and we're getting Rogue."
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. Obviously, I feel like some of the other Valiant members, I think that you could keep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know that I think that brings up a good point. I mentioned this in a conversation not too long ago that I think that even in the expansion
Mm-hmm.
for season 2, in terms of just how many teams the Overwatch League is going to have, I would love to see a France team or like a Paris, something that's based out of Paris.
Yeah.
And then you take the Eagle Gaming roster, which is a European contenders team that's legitimately just all French.
Mm-hmm.
You bring over AKM, you bring over Sunanunko, and you just start to reform Old Rogue.
Okay.
With just
Wins
a
as
deeper
coach,
bench.
yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could do wins as coach.
You cannot let that guy play. Apparently, that's what I've been told from every Overwatch thing ever. Smart mind cannot let that guy play.
I guess that's fair. I mean, I guess that's up to the team to decide. But yeah, I would love to see Wins come in as coach and the reunion of the French team, because I mean, we've seen it in League, we've seen it in CS.
All national teams.
I think the French
work.
they like to keep it within the country. So I would love to see it. I don't know if Valiant's going to do it. I think they've invested too much in their Korean talent, and again, having a trilingual team probably isn't the best idea.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it's not. It's just never really a bright idea. Again, on paper it looks great. You have a great French people or French players. You have great Korean players. You have some great and hungry North American talent, and you just put them all together, and on paper it should work. But the intangibles are just a little too strong in that case. But I'd love to see Valiant go full French. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Like, I think they're like one of the few teams that could actually, go in reverse and actually get a good team going. I'm just saying. Like, it's pretty desperate for them. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty desperate. But a team that is going forward and how do I say it? Basically, it feels kind of creepy if I actually like lay it out for you. Basically, here's how you can explain San Francisco Shock and make it sound really creepy. Basically, this is a team that is literally waiting for a bunch of people to turn 18 and become legal.
True.
That is very creepy in a sense, but not so creepy when we're just talking about Overwatch now.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Sinatra has shown up, and I'm pretty sure they're still waiting for Super. Is that right?
I believe so. Don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely too sure exactly if he's able to play in stage 3 or not.
Okay.
But I think so.
Okay, and they got the guy everybody told me is the one,
Yes,
Architect.
Yes. He's the builder. He's gonna, and I said this in another podcast, and I wasn't chosen for it, but to each their own. Architect, if they can incorporate him within that team, I think fills a lot of missing gaps. Again, makes them very, very meta resistant. On paper, this team looks to be really, really good. I think they could use a main tank. Not to say that Nomi's necessarily bad, but I think that they could use someone to kind of bounce ideas off of for him.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that his Ryan isn't terrible. I think it's actually quite good. But if there was going to be a weakest member on that team now that they've kind of subbed out Dak for the foreseeable future, maybe they bring him on high tempo strategies. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think then the kind of ball comes to Nomi, and I feel like that team could use another main tank. And I think it would do pretty well for them. But there again, who knows? But if they can incorporate Architect, they could make a lot of things happen. I think they could play spoiler to a lot of teams. But again, you have to, and I don't like stressing the word incorporated, but you have to make sure that kid is able to play up to his level, because if he does, Shock is going to be a scary team. That and if you can get Sinatra to really pop off, I think that team's going to be scary.
All right, so there are a few things to talk about for Shock that I have questions for. The first is,
Yeah.
all right, if you look at the way this team is kind of structured, they do, in a sense, try to play around the DPS. Like, obviously, there's the entire Baby Bay thing when they couldn't use Sinatra. So, I think it's possible with Architect if they do something similar. But my question is, why does this team crumble? Because
I think
when push comes to shove, they just fall down and then they don't get back up. It's like Humpty Dumpty out here.
yeah, it takes them quite a long time to pick up those pieces. I feel like they're just a heavily emotional team. Overall, I think they're still trying to find their style, because if you look at their game in the regular season for Stage 2 against Seoul, they played a very like aggressive kind of Philly style, but then they don't play that versus some of these other teams like London, which I thought was very strange, or maybe it necessarily didn't, have as much success against London and scrims. So they're trying to, I still think they're trying to find exactly what color they are, what style they want to play with.
Okay.
And again, I think that their lack of projectile really limited them in terms of what they could and could not play. Baby Bay, he's been a pretty good hit scan specialist, but I think they were just limited in terms of just composition choices. But that married with this kind of emotional mindset, they win really hard, but they could also just throw at any point where something doesn't go as well, and they just shut down vocally, and the team just kind of falls apart. So I think they've solved one of those issues with adding Sinatra and Architect, but we'll see exactly what happens in terms of just how emotional I feel like this team is. I don't know exactly how to fix that, but maybe calling up a sports psych might help, possibly. I don't know.
I'm just looking real quick. It looks to me like a bunch of these players are pretty young on San Francisco Shock.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that's been their kind of big mantra, or their big kind of marketing point, is that they're trying to invest in the future, and they're trying to buy up a lot of these young talented players, which hats off to them, they have. And like you said, it is kind of creepy that we're waiting for these kids to come of age so they can play in these esports cyber athletes arenas. Yeah. But
all right, because all right, I guess they might have a chance to do what you're talking about, gain that experience, assuming Overwatch League works in Monte Cristo's theoretical theoretical theory, where it's part of the year is obviously this Overwatch League, but the rest of the year is going to be the Open Tournament, and that's a much faster way relative to let's say League of Legends circuit, where you're going to be sending these players to LANs, and then LANs have all these other different problems to talk about, and then you basically fire forge them through LANs, through groups, through playoffs and then they come back and oh shit, we are ready to play.
Exactly.
Right. So we'll see. We'll see if it works or see if it doesn't work. It really depends on if tournaments show up, and second, if they decide to send them to these tournaments.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the big question, is looking at, I'm assuming very analogous to what an IEM would have been for LCS. Half those teams didn't even decide to go. So is it contractually obligated for them to go? Who knows? But I certainly hope so. Yeah. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. But basically it's all right, this is off tangent, but basically what I would do if I was a big tournament organizer, I would set up a tournament where I'd get the good Overwatch League teams, and then I'd throw them against every Korean contender team, and then run that tournament and see what would happen.
Yeah, I'd love that. I think that's really interesting.
Because basically it's you've returned, and now you're gonna get the crap kicked out of you by a bunch of Koreans, hopefully. But
so I wouldn't take all Koreans. I actually think that some of the I would take two contenders qualifiers for North America, 2 from Europe, and then 4 from Korea. Because I think if you go below 4 in Korea, you start to get the flash start
getting really bad teams. Yeah,
and then it's just okay, you wouldn't even cut it in Europe.
You wouldn't cut.
So
basically
we'll cut our losses.
The best of the teams. Yes. Of course, we're excluding China because nobody knows what the fuck is happening in China.
Sadly, we have seen some of the miraculous youngster players come out of retirement to play for Shanghai's academy team. So, maybe they'll overtake their main roster at one point in the next few years, but we'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
like I think there's like there's a serious issue with that entire team. Like I've actually considered basically saying maybe they might have accidentally killed Chinese Overwatch,
It's possible, yeah. I mean, they're the only Chinese representative, and
and
I can't
they don't
imagine
even believe in the
contenders are really
Chinese.
smart.
They don't even believe in the Chinese, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, especially when you consider like how, like, all right. So basically, when news came out of basically Shanghai getting those Korean players, right? Like, but they're like a bunch of like translated reactions of the Chinese players, like Chinese fans, but it's like this is bullshit, etc., etc. And basically, none of the Western guys get it, but there's certainly a case of like some kind of nationalism going on, where
Sure.
yeah, fair. It is a club. It's not supposed to be a national team, but the way the Chinese think of it is, why would I support a team that's not even like a national team when it's the only Chinese team in the entire league? And not only are you like, here's the thing, you can actually get away with like these Korean imports if they were like godlike Korean imports.
Yeah.
And
they're not.
these are not godlike Korean imports. So it feels like not only are you shitting the bed, not only are you like skipping on Chinese talent, you are getting the worst, not the worst, but like mediocre.
You're like tier 2 Korean talent.
You're getting like mediocre Korean talent. So unless you literally start winning, I think like the hardcore Chinese fan base is going to disappear very soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. And then by stage 4, you're going to hear this article from me called like The Shame of China or something.
Pulling some movie quote. I don't know. Something straight from like the Odyssey.
Yeah, some crazy shit like that.
Beowulf shit. Yeah.
Like you failed this nation or whatever. But speaking of failing a nation or failing a region, it's Dallas Fuel, the team that is not a team.
No, not at all.
I don't even know where you want to start with this.
I think we've all seen the reports. It's nothing new to anybody. You could tell it does make a lot of sense what the players are saying in terms of just who they decided to play and when they decided to play them.
Yeah.
Why is Rascal not playing on a map that favors Genji? I don't know. Apparently there's, internal drama.
Apparently nobody knows.
Allowing him.
Rascal doesn't know. Kai doesn't know. AKM doesn't know. None of these people know. This is like Rashomon, except real life. Mm-hmm. Everybody got a different story.
It's somebody's to blame, and I can't necessarily.
You can't point out to who, can you?
I can't. But the one thing that I would say is that, if nobody knows what's going on, and the coach doesn't know what's going on or claims that he doesn't, then I actually look at Hastro and I'm like, okay, you built this, so nobody knows what to do. So what are you gonna do? Yeah. Are you is there going to be some serious restructuring in terms of coming into stage 3? Are you nuking the team? Because apparently this team isn't a team.
Yeah,
they aren't communicating with each other. I mean, it seems like there's just a lapse in communication overall.
Yeah,
but again, that's just what we see. Who's to say what happens behind the scenes? But with that lack of transparency, I'm gonna have to kind of start to assume, and I can't necessarily be blamed. At least I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Basically, this video is probably going to come out tomorrow. So for those who don't know, it's probably going to be Tuesday, right?
Sure.
But it's also going to be a preview for my own article, which I'm probably releasing tomorrow.
Okay.
Basically, it's called The Broken Kingdom, which is the Dallas Fuel. And basically, if you look at every fucking thing they did, I'm not talking about strategically or tactically or individually speaking, because, these are all context for what they're fucking up with. I'm not going to be reinforced oh man, you guys need to be confident. Listen, he does have a point, but
yeah.
Here's the thing: is this team is literally not a team. In fact, XQC wasn't the problem. XQC was just a magnified version of what every other player and every other person on this team is going through. Yes. Basically, from management all the way down, because we now know with Hashow's weird ass tweet, management has decided the coach and managing team can actually control the team. What the fuck
what
is
that?
What
does that even mean?
Because basically that just means that, if I had to guess, that just means Hirsch or whatever it was, decided to fuck around with the team and think this was some weird GM game, in one of those soccer manager games.
Yeah.
And they fucked it up. And then you have
It's like,
everybody.
okay, Kaikai, you take up and see what you can do.
And like Hawkeye's
I
like,
don't know why you.
Hawkeye's like, what? You basically fucked me for the first two stages. Now I have to like save this fucking team. And then like Rascal's like, what are you guys talking about? Let's practice. Like Rascal's like, no. And then he was like, no, you're an asshole. Like all this shit's going down. Basically, everybody on this team is no longer interested in the team. They're interested in like their own self interest. So look out for that. Basically, this team is like just a group of individuals. And
feels like it.
listen, they all have the same goal. It's just they all think they are the right ones. So it's a very complicated, very complicated system. And basically, I think I actually don't know what kind of coach Kaikai is. Like, do you have insight? Do you have insight, like whether strategically, tactically, or as a person?
I think he has a good mind for the game. I know that they've been very loose in terms of what they decide to run. I mean, you can look at their very strange and wonky. I think it was Apex Season 3.
Yeah.
They actually ran quite a bit of Torb
Yeah.
on like certain points.
Mhm.
And then they peppered in Sombra with Torb, which nobody was running. So there's that. I think he does have like a good mind for the game. I don't know outside of that,
Yeah.
you know, how he is as a person. I've never really communicated with him much at all. That outside of that, yeah, I'm not entirely too sure.
Yeah, basically, I think this team probably should actually go into a fight club. Like, I'm not joking. Like they
Probably do him some good.
like they physically need to like get whatever rage they have against each other and then figure it out.
Just get it out.
Because listen, this actually, as far as I know, this actually happened with the polls in CS 1.6. They got into literal fist fights. The next day, they won the tournament. This has also happened with Newbie. Now, you're asking who's Newbie because you told me earlier you didn't follow Dota 2.
I think they had like I know that they have an Overwatch League team, and I think I remember them from League, but you know, outside of that, I
Okay,
wouldn't
so
know
I'll tell you this.
Dota.
Basically, Newbie at the time had two very important players in Dota 2 history. They had Xiaowei, arguably the greatest leader of all time, and they have Hao, arguably the greatest player of all time. And at TI4, they bombed out of the group stage and barely clung on. And then this is basically a bunch of people told me about this like way after the fact. They got into literal fist fights.
Okay.
But if you look at the results, they won that fucking tournament. Right?
Yeah, I guess if you just get the emotion out.
Like basically it's not the fact that they have conflicts, like it's the fact that you can work through the conflicts no matter what's happening. That's what makes a team. Like that's what makes you professional in a sense. And
oddly enough, yeah.
Like here's another example. E.g. from Dota 2 was multiple people from multiple pros basically called the most toxic team of all time. Also straight up the best NA team of any esport ever. Mm-hmm. So many consistent results. So many high placing lands. And the reason they did it is because they all put their bullshit aside when push came to shove.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't actually know if Kaikai is that kind of person who can get these people to work like that. Because if he isn't, you gotta blow this up and you gotta call Runaway. That's my answer.
Yeah. That would be a great answer. I think that's a great choice. That would definitely prove much more consistent results, and it probably would increase their placing and save them for Season 1 playoffs for sure.
Yeah. It's because I think Runaway's a pretty sick team.
Yeah. So far, so good in contenders. I got to catch up on some VOD. They look pretty solid. Yeah. And they've consistently been solid since about Season 1. Yeah. So I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
They have a system. They have a team culture. What's not to like except for the price tag? But apparently they're pretty cheap because nobody else wants them for whatever reason. So
who knows?
Yeah. So I think that's a hope. And then
that's a choice, definitely.
Yeah, that's a choice. And now, finally, Shanghai. The shame of China. I don't even want to talk about this team, but put it this way: did you ever see there's this amazing YouTube video? Like somebody linked it to me because I don't watch football, but basically, I understand football because I'm from America. Like you basically get taught that shit every day.
Yeah,
but
kind of.
At least for the Shanghai Dragons, like they remind me of the Cleveland Browns, and I saw this amazing video talking about how the Cleveland Browns achieved greatness not through being great, but through being so disastrously bad throughout all the years that I'll go ahead and say like they have done something amazing, because I don't think anybody will ever be that bad ever again. And Shanghai Dragons, they're starting to build up that legacy, man. They're starting to build up the continued losses. And so everybody's talking about Guri and whatever, but no, I think the real story is Shanghai Dragons is complete shit. I think that's the real story here. And shout out to Shanghai Dragons, because I actually know when to turn off the stream when the Shanghai Dragons logo shows. I was like, okay.
Sadly.
And
like if there's a close match, maybe I'll keep it on. I'm like, come on, Shanghai, you can your first win. Like that's still like a decent story, but it just never happens.
It never happens, right? Because like they have all of the problems. I don't even know where you would begin with all of the problems, because there is no starting point.
No, they're an absolute shipwreck. You've got two players just leaving spontaneously. Obviously, you can't help, family emergencies, but then just one player up and leaves. Nobody knows if he's coming back. There's drama there. You're bringing in Korean talent that's, pretty good.
But they don't speak Chinese.
But they don't speak Chinese, so you're automatically going to throw the team kind of structure out the window and try to restructure around another language and then try to fit them in. It might as well just be called a different team, because you're going to be playing completely new players.
Yeah.
I don't know. They can only go up from here. I mean, they can't lose.
They can't lose any worse. That is true.
Exactly.
That is true. There's literally no place down. Like for other teams, there are places downwards. Like there's like relegations or whatever. There is no relegations here. They are literally shit tier, the worst of the shit tier. And oh man, there's so much weird shit going on with Shanghai, because. Like I don't understand. All right, basically, to end this rant about Shanghai, the two best things they have done throughout this entire Overwatch League. First is their logo. It's a pretty decent logo. Yeah, I'll give them that. And then the second was their apologies. Apologies are pretty good for being bad, but that's about it. If that's the highlight of your season, you gotta do something. You got shit to do, man.
Runaway.
Yeah, this team literally needs to blow it up and get run away.
Yeah, definitely. Again, that's another choice you can do. Like, there's like 3 or 4 teams in Korea that you could easily just copy and paste over, barring some obviously jet lag and cultural fits, but they could just solve your franchise's problems like very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, and a team that I used to almost put in the same category as Shanghai Dragons. Now, listen, I was never so mean as to put them in the same category as Shanghai Dragons, because at least when you look at the roster, it kind of made sense. Like, it made sense, right? Mayhem.
Yes, Mayhem is definitely turning it around. They the one thing that I definitely have noticed with that team is that they do seem more cohesive, and through the kind of listen-ins that we've gotten through stage 2, they seem very calm, and I think that's very interesting when it comes to like esports history. Is one of the earlier videos that I watched for Counter-Strike was listening into, I think it was Fnatic's.
It has to be Fnatic. They literally don't talk.
Yeah, they just very rarely talk. And when you look at some of the scattered comms from North America in esports history in general, or just generally, they're very just like shouty, and they echo a lot of things, and Europeans tend to be pretty quiet. They just keep everything at a very kind of unspoken level, and only speak when they need to, and they have to communicate things, which I think has played into Florida's hands really, really well. And if they can incorporate some of their new talent in and work upon that, even if let's imagine that they never signed some of these Korean players. I think that they're definitely on the rise, and they could play up into, I would say, middle of the pack. And I guess if they surge, maybe stage 3's meta plays into their hand. Yeah, maybe they can test stage playoffs or 2. But it's nice to see that they're actually competitive now.
They're alive. Yes, unlike the Dead Dragon,
unlike Shanghai,
which has gone extinct.
Yes,
it was actually extinct before on arrival. It's like so.
It's actually now a myth. Now we don't even know if they actually exist. Who's to say?
Yeah, but basically, it's kind of weird because basically, as far as I can tell, Zappist was the catalyst for all this change, but he hasn't played.
He's played like a map or two, and they've tried to like make him work and fit him in. But yeah, it seems very strange that he comes in and they start to resurge, but he isn't playing. So like,
Yeah.
maybe he's doing some like assistant coaching roles, but also as a player. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
But
Or maybe it's like
God bless,
they're
doing well.
here is a quote from a Dota 2 captain, Kuroki. Basically says he says every team needs the fear of being cut.
Yeah.
And maybe
Definitely.
Zappos was that fear. Because maybe Zappos was like, Zappos showed up and Logic's like, oh, fucking shit. I have been shit this entire time. It's time to show up. Because listen, Logix is actually like the most, I guess. He's good now, but he was the most online player. One of the most online players we've ever seen in Overwatch.
Definitely. He definitely has like he's earned the moniker Lord Logix because he can play up to that level where you would start to give someone a title.
Yeah.
But he's been pretty absent in Overwatch League so far, but towards the end of stage 2, he's definitely donned his robe and crown and sat upon that throne once again. I think he's really kind of come back into his own. But can he keep that consistent level is the question. Can he come into stage 3 and play up to that level is one of the big themes or the big narratives surrounding Mayhem. Because if they can, I think they're going to be very scary.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's still Seiya player, awesome guy. So, not a bad team overall, at least.
Not at all.
And Tavik seems to have found his mojo again. Seems to have found, I won't say old Tavik, because I think old Tavik was still better than this Tavik. But certainly better than recent Tavik.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so I think that covers it for the league, but I still have some questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So, basically, I do not keep up with any of the updates or any of their plans. Like, there are too many rules in this league, and
stages what is a stage?
And rules and like patches and shit. Yeah. So I'm just gonna ask: is there another patch coming for stage 3?
I believe the stage 3 patch is going to be the Sombra kind of rework, which means that she will no longer get ult charge from health packs, which kind of changes how she plays. So she won't be necessarily like a glorified support. She still kind of plays a supportive role, but she's more DPS centric. And we've seen teams like British Hurricanes run her in a triple DPS composition. We've seen teams in Korea legitimately run her all the time, like full time with a tracer or a soldier. Yeah. Majority of the time, I believe it's tracer, but there again,
I mean, it makes
nobody's
sense.
even
Basically
too sure.
Just disable their skills and go ham.
That's I think that's one of the bigger things is that it's also going to change. Obviously, with one change, there's kind of a reaction to it, in other roles as well. There could be more tank compositions. We've seen, some interesting creative strategies coming out of Contenders Korea, where Reinhardt's kind of being peppered in. There's less Zenyatta now. There's a little bit more Moira. It kind of is up in the air. Nobody's at least I'm not too sure. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm not too sure exactly what Overwatch League is going to look like. I think every team is going to have a hard time trying to find their style and what they want to do, which will be interesting because I think teams like New York, I think teams like Philly are going to be very comfortable just playing what they want to play, and they're just going to force you to play against them and their color. So will that play into their hands? It's hard to tell, but in terms of just patch specific things, I think that you could see more. You're definitely going to see more Sombra, and I think you're going to see less Genji, less Zenyatta, and maybe even a little bit more Reaper. There's a hot fix to his ultimate that makes it a little bit better, but outside of that, if that's actually the patch that's played, I'm not entirely too sure, but we'll see.
Okay. Second question is, what do you think of the scouting of Overwatch League teams? Because when I look at these teams, I actually, here's how I legitimately think of what these teams are doing. Is like they're all talking up that like stat shit, like, oh, we got that metrics, oh, we got that shit, oh, look at we're gonna get that we're gonna get that undervalued player. In reality, what happened was, oh, we got fucked over by Koreans. Let's just go to Korea. It's an easy way to fix these problems. Let's just get me some Koreans. That's what it looks like to me.
That's historically been a great buy. They're worth their weight in gold as long as you're doing your scouting right. Hats off to Harsha, because I believe that he's been pestering that organization to get Architect. Then it's, you know, can't blame him. The kid's amazing. As long as, again, you can bring him into that team and make him work, he's gonna just be a plus to that team in terms of just how they age in the first season and maybe even the second season, but immediately upgrade. But overall, scouting's been all right. I think it's actually been pretty good. We'll see what happens in stage 2 when contracts start to expire. Or I'm sorry, not stage 2, season 2.
Okay.
Once contracts start to exit, there's a lot of players and contenders that deserve and will be just a flat upgrade to these teams. I don't know if they're just waiting for the contracts to expire or what, but you look at Panker. The kid is just hard carrying Gladiators Legion in North American contenders. If you're looking for like a European team to fill out, you could just take anybody basically from Hurricane and trial them. I think they're just a great bunch of guys, and they're quite talented. And then you've got Korea, and they still have some of the best players in the world just sat there on their hands and
still have a fully formed team that can go head to head with a bunch of these teams. Still, right?
Yep. Yeah. And there again, you've got the expansion coming in. So I don't know if, there's an expansion in terms of Overwatch League teams that they don't just go to Korea and buy out the teams. If I was to say, what do you want to do with your $20 million? Do you want to win, or do you want to like market? I would say, if you want to win, there's Element Mystic, there's Seven, there's Runaway, there's, Gladiators Legion players. Like, there's contenders teams that are actually pretty good, but there's Korean talent out there that you can easily scoop up for free.
See, a lot of people miss the trick, but basically they should have done what Cloud9 did. You win, and then all your win becomes marketability, and then you start selling off them players, and you
just rally them off, or you auction them off to the highest bidder. Fissure for 1 million, and Gladiator steps up and takes them, and look where they are now.
Like, Fissure's pretty good, but basically that's basically how I'm not sure how I would have done it, because basically I might have just like thrown the gamble, gone all American, get all the fan base if it happened to be good, and if not, then I at least have the TSN documentary of everything going to shit. But
yeah, exactly. You just go full Valiant mode, and you just kind of whore them out. Sadly enough,
right.
But yeah.
So here's my other theoretical question, basically, because I don't watch outside of Overwatch League right now.
Okay.
So, what are the areas you think would go for expansion? Like, because I'm not talking about like what makes business sense, because it's not like either of us really knows. I think.
Yeah.
Unless you have like some mystery. Yeah. Okay. But but I do know, since you watch contenders, where the good players are coming from, and obviously I'm gonna go ahead and say China's dead, or Shanghai is literally the worst scouter of all time. One of these two things must be true.
Yeah,
could be both. Actually, I'll be fair to Shanghai. They could both be terrible scouters, and China could be dead.
I don't know if China is just out of the question in terms of expansion, because I heard on somebody's podcast that they're making like esports cities, and they're trying to build them up.
They're making esports cities, but like, if we're talking about China, like their big games right now is their biggest games right now is PUBG right? And League of Legends, basically.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Fortnite's big there yet, but maybe.
True. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I guess it's not completely out of the question, at least for me. Maybe somebody just kind of throws like Beijing a bone, or some other just random Chinese city. But outside of that, I'd love for another European edition. I would love for another Korean edition. I think Busan's up there as a big candidate in terms of Europe.
Seoul number 2. I mean,
you could do Seoul number 2.
They did LA number 2, so I don't.
I'm sure there's going to be multiple LA teams. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 4 LA teams at this point, or if somebody even tries to go for, maybe
Orange County,
like in NorCal, Orange County or the Bay Area, whatever. It's like, okay, how many times can you remarket just LA?
Just remarket California.
The
global Overwatch League, where 20 teams come from California. Is this like the United States or some bullshit?
It does feel like that with this first season, but I feel like if they just market a little bit more towards Europe and make that divisional divide a little bit more apparent, I think that would be really interesting because it like actually makes teams. It still gives you about the same parity in terms of just how many teams are in like a region,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes regional storylines start to occur. It's like, oh, what if the best team in the Pacific played against the best team in the Atlantic? Like, oh, that'd be a pretty sick team. It's like London versus New York all over again, right? But yeah, I think it's more geared towards Europe, something like Germany, maybe a French team. Um, I'd love to see a Spanish team. That'd be kind of cool. Hell, give Brazil a team. Why not?
Yeah, Fallen can make that team or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Fallen's got 20 mil.
Yeah, you could.
Let's go, Fallen.
What what about SEA? Are they gone?
That's the weird part because they had Flash Wolves, which was like pretty good. At least from what I understood, they were actually like pretty good.
And they made a stadium too, and all that.
Yeah, but they've kind of just not exited, but just like been very, very quiet in terms of just how good some of those teams are. But who knows? That it's possible that there's some hidden talent out there. I'm not entirely too sure because that's like there's so much Overwatch going on right now that you have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
And sadly, like South America and like OCE and SCE just have kind of gone to the wayside for me. So
yeah,
we'll see.
There's too much shit going on. I'll have to find some kind of insider for those regions if I want to know. All right. So,
yeah.
Let's see here. There was one more thing. Let me think. It was. Oh right. Basically, is there some theoretical way in which teams are modeling like synergy? Because, like, when you look at like Reinforce's argument for Shanghai, basically says it might work, or he says he's optimistic about it. I'm not, but he's optimistic about it because he basically says, listen. It's true, they are both speaking their secondary English language. And what he doesn't realize is not only are they speaking their secondary English language, they're speaking it in a Chinese and Korean accent. So it's going to be even worse. And to put it in perspective, Chinese people can't even understand other Chinese people if they come from a different area because of the dialect. So shit's going to get real weird when they start speaking English. I'll give you that. Now, basically he's saying the tanks are one group, and then the DPS is another group, and then the support is like the third group. And somehow these disparate groups will have synergy within each other, and then maybe it could work. But I'm not sure it works that way. But you care to enlighten me? Like, how do you think it works?
I think it's probably the easiest way to explain to anybody how a team could potentially work, but in terms of just like an ideal model for right now, just operating within like the stage 1, and you could even look at like stage 2. If I had to build a team and kind of manufacture synergy in some way, or just buy someone who has pre-established synergy, I think the best way to do it is have main tank and flanking synergy, if that makes sense. So the profit gesture kind of mentality that Yiska likes to ramble about all day. I think that would be the most ideal and the easiest to see immediate results with. But in terms of like idyllic synergy, I would say obviously having everybody on the same page would be great, but if I had to choose like one or two people, it would probably, I guess it would probably be the main tank, sub tank, and like main flanker. So like Tracer, Diva, Winston. Yeah, having those three on the same page at all times and kind of having like an unspoken kind of communication factor, I think would yield you some amazing results. Just look at what Fisher did when he went to LA. You have, a Korean main tank with a Korean DPS, or, potentially, a full-time Korean DPS and a Korean off tank. And they've shot up, 4 or 5 placings, and they look like a potential stage playoff contender. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that those 3.
All right. And what was the final one? Oh, basically, how do I explain this? Basically, when Overwatch League started, this is actually, if this feels like closer to a traditional sport, and I'm not talking about like the production or any of that
Yeah.
shit. I'm basically talking about the way the teams are being run, as
Sure.
in they not only have a main team, but they have like six, basically like six subs basically for every position,
Mm-hmm.
or ideally they want that many.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought in my head, listen, this is like theoretically great, but have any of these people actually run esports teams? Because the egos are going to get out of control. Not only are the egos going to get out of control, you don't even have enough time scrim wise to play
Yeah.
all these teams basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my question to you. Is there an actual like limit you should be putting on these teams? Because listen, having 12 is great and all, but you go into that drama with Fuel. Basically in a team of 12, nobody is playing scrims.
um, are you asking that should there be a limit to the player cap?
No,
Is that
I'm
the
asking
question?
if you had a team, would you put a limit to how many players you put in? Because even in the best team, which is basically New York Excel,
Yeah.
they've come to the conclusion, Pine, get the fuck out. We don't need you on Ilios anymore. It's just gonna be these 7 people or whatever.
I in like the ideal world, if you could make a 12-man roster work, like something similar to like what London tried,
Mm-hmm.
and you could keep the egos in check. Obviously, that's like the best way. But again, we're all humans. We are but mere men and women. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
Gigary's in here now, so and all the future Overwatch League talent out there. Let's go.
And Extinct
But
Dragons, yes.
sadly, yeah, they shouldn't exist, but they do. I would say that yeah, 12 players is probably the ideal like concept that I would love to try, but I think it just doesn't make sense for just people because again, they're professional players. They are competitors. They want to compete. You know, they're not happy with riding the bench. I think having at least like 1 or 2 subs per role feels like the right idea. So a roster anywhere from like 9 to 10 feels like the kind of golden spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say, having at least 1 or 2 subs per role. So having like an extra tank player, DPS, and an extra support, or maybe an extra flex and main support. So yeah, I would say around 9 to 10, maybe not 12, but having enough of a bench to rely on if you need like a curveball or if somebody's just not feeling up to it.
Okay, all right. So another question is new hero busted? I assume the new hero is busted because it's new, but I haven't actually played it.
Brigitte. She's weird because she kind of in my mind, I kind of give every hero like a secondary title, right?
Yeah.
So Tracer just isn't an offense player. She's a hit scan and she's a flanker, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit more nuance to it if you do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Someone like Mei, right? She's a defensive hero, but what does defense mean? Well, she does DPS, but she's actually operates like a tank because she actually edits the map, so you can't actually do anything in this area. So she creates this hard kind of rigid form of space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like a Winston, again, just a very stereotypical main tank. But somebody like Diva or Roadhog, they're kind of in this weird flux of being a tank, but also like a DPS.
Yeah.
Brigitte is like a support, but also like a tank. So she's like a sub tank, so she kind of fills the same role as Diva, but she also does a decent amount of healing. If we see her, just thinking about how the meta is right now, just in stage 2, if we were going to see her, it would be the same maps that you see Moira or like a Reinhardt. Something that's a little bit less centric on the high ground, something that's a little bit more close quarters, something similar to Nepal, maybe even a Hollywood A, maybe King's Row, something similar to that, where you can play that slow kind of grindy composition. I think she would excel there.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, does she kill dive? I don't know. It's hard to say. I would have to see some scrims of contenders teams playing it to say for sure and pick some brains of some people, but I don't know that she's busted, but she could be very good if a meta allowed it. I would say that if for whatever reason dive becomes obsolete, she would be pretty good, I would say.
Okay. All right, and here's a weird one.
Sure.
Basically, as far as I can tell, you have 1 to 3 shot callers per team.
Sure.
And is there any rhyme or reason to putting more than one in a particular matchup? So, for instance, like I remember it was like might have been. It was definitely one of the Korean teams. Basically, they're like, yeah, sometimes they put in a second or third shot caller specifically for this map or specifically for this matchup. Is there any reason for that? Like, is there like some weird map that's really complicated to deal with?
Not really. I mean, I think maybe certain players just have a better feel for a map, that they kind of have a better just understanding of what needs to happen and what areas to control. But no, I think that just shot calling overall is just very general in this game. I feel like, yes, you should have like 2 to 3 because you need a big picture person, like in the moment type person, and then maybe even someone for compositions or just general like attitude, on the fly attitude adjustment, a la Mickey, right? If you don't have Mickey within that team, I don't know if this team just gets up and breaks keyboards over the opponent's heads. Like, I don't know if this could turn into WWE if you don't have Mickey.
Probably break the keyboards over each other and say they never did it.
Possibly, yeah. Oh, it wasn't me, it was him. Twitter, quick help! Like, I don't know, it's possible, but
I'm actually surprised Mickey is so happy living in Florida.
He's just a happy-go-lucky guy, I don't know if anything could just break that man. I think he's worth again. Time. I think he's just working. If he doesn't get scrim time, I don't know who is. But
no, basically that's the theory, isn't it? Like OGE plus Siegel for some reason. That's what people are saying on Reddit. Now I don't actually think Siegel's better than Mickey, but you want to enlighten me on that? I don't think Siegel's that good compared to Mickey.
Mickey has been a little bit of a liability from what I understand, where at times he can just kind of go off on his own. Siegel, I feel like, is a little bit more rigid, and Mickey is a little bit more instinctual, where he just feels like he needs to be in a certain place, and maybe that's just the wrong place at a certain time. But I think that Mickey probably brings a little bit more
happiness to the black hole that is Dallas.
And I think
Fuel.
that you're just going to need that for a long time to kind of really rebuild that team.
Yeah.
Unless the team just instantly just gets all booked and they just sign somebody else in terms of just an entire roster. I think you're probably going to keep Mickey for a while. I like Siegel. I think Siegel actually has a great mind for the game. I think he's incredibly smart, but I just got to see more from him. I've only seen like 1 or 2 games. They've looked okay. They've looked pretty good. But, coming in with a new main tank, I think that definitely is going to throw a wrench into whatever plan that has worked for about a week. So it's back to the drawing board once again for the Dallas Fuel. So it's hard to say. We'll see.
And then one more question. There's like a bunch of these teams. Like when I look at their rosters, there's like these random players I completely forget are on these teams. Like straight up, like, oh man, this guy was on this team. What?
Yeah, just randomly, like Avast is on Boston. Have you ever seen him? Nah. Have you ever seen Numlocked on LA Valiant? Nah. Like
Coco is still alive. What is this?
Coco's still alive. Yeah, one of the historically better main tank players in the game. He's still alive and kicking. What are they going to do with him? Beats me. Like I'm pretty much over predicting what actually happens in the Overwatch League, because at times it doesn't feel like there's any rhyme or reason for it, or maybe there is, but nobody will ever know because they tend to try to keep that stuff off Twitter. But maybe Dallas is the exception to that rule.
Shout outs to Dallas. Yes.
Yeah.
really going into the public arena.
Yeah, it's a great publicity, even though it's unintentional, I think.
Listen, I do mention this in the article, like I've already written. But basically, there are times where the coach does go into the public arena to shame players. Shout outs to I Love Oov. Did you ever watch Brood War?
Yeah.
Well,
I know.
Oh, you know of him, right?
Yeah.
Basically, this guy really fucked with his opponents because he was like the first guy to figure out like you can psychologically manipulate opponents based off of the interviews.
Sure.
So he would always pose himself as bigger than he was, or like tricking them into thinking he was going to do one thing when he's actually going to do another. Or when he became a coach, he basically used it to shame all of his players. Like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and I know you're all reading this. So think and reflect on my fucking words, for a moment. Like that's the I love Uwe. I don't know if Kai is thinking like that, but that's certainly the I love Uwe.
Possibly, I don't know. I mean,
So maybe
it's certainly possible, but
maybe he's playing some kind of 4D Korean chess.
Kai's 4D chess. I can see it on YouTube now.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll end it with this. We'll end it with a prediction because last time, last time I asked for predictions, basically you're like, yeah, best teams will remain the best teams because it's not like we can predict the fucking future with the meta and shit. But this time, seriously, do you think the top five teams right now, Excel, London, Fusion, Seoul, Gladiators, are they going to continue being the top five in the next stage?
I would say yes to
the Koreans,
New York, London. I don't know about Seoul. I want to. Like, I'm a Seoul fan. I like Seoul. I've liked Lunatic Eye for a long time, but I don't know. It's really hard to put my finger on exactly what they're gonna do if this is a Sombra meta, because they do have a Sombra player in Fleta, but he's also their best player. Exactly. So you're putting him in like he's going to be a support. He's going to be like kind of a supportive DPS player to fill whose shoes? Munchkins. Sadly, he kind of is a little bit inconsistent. He pops off when he wants, but then he kind of flounders at times as well. Yeah. So maybe you put Guido in. Maybe you use Bunny. It's hard to say.
Nobody wants to use Bunny.
Sadly, I think the kid's really good, but
it's not good on this team.
Nah, not really. It doesn't seem like he just fits within this team at all. I think if you put him with, funny enough, I think if you put him with Fissure, I think if you could make that work on paper, that would be incredibly.
It is true. Fissure is a way better tank than Miro. So
yes, but if you could get Miro on page with any of Soul's tracers, I feel like that team would just be like permanently third.
Does Miro work with any tracers? Because that's my problem with Miro, actually.
I don't know.
Historically speaking, can't think of any time where he's like good with a tracer, except with that bad one. What's his name?
Eska?
Yeah, Eska. Except for Eska, basically. Think about that for a moment. Eska was the worst of all these tracers, but he had the best synergy with Miro.
Well, the synergy with Miro is that he just kind of let Miro go in, and Eska would play. He would play a very Sabiolbi-esque tracer, but kind of similar to Clockwork, where he would be able to match tracers, but he wasn't like playing aggressive. He would play very passive and kind of defensive. Yeah. Which worked for them at the time, but
basically everybody got better since, and now that style's
that style seems to be pretty obsolete. You could make it work, but it's gonna take some serious
Basically, Miro doesn't work with any modern tracer. Does he?
At least it feels like it.
How many more tracers do Soul Dynasty need to have before you're like, yes, it doesn't work?
Maybe it's not the tracer players. Maybe it's the main tank. Yeah. They have to have somebody who's, or maybe it's an overall. Maybe it's a systematic thing. I don't know. I've looked at.
I did say in the last one after stage one, like they had to kick Miro. I think I said something like that. I still think that's the case.
Yeah, it's either that or they have to change exactly how they view the game, because this isn't working. Their dives are disjointed. He isn't using his ults the right way, at least, in an effective way. And then you've got Kuki coming in, because that's the kind of idea, right? You'd think that, okay, if Miro's the problem, just bring him out, put another tank in. Well, we've seen that. We've seen Kuki come in, but even then, there's disjointed dives. It doesn't necessarily seem to work. I don't know if it's just a systematic thing within the team that they're not drilling that. I have no idea. It's really hard.
They're Koreans. They are almost certainly drilling that. Let's be real.
I would imagine.
This is not a team. Like, the great thing about a team like Soul Dynasty or a team like SK in CSGO is they are not fucking around with practice. So when they fuck up, it isn't because they were lacking motivation or any of that bullshit. It's because this is what happened. So
I just don't know the answer to their problems. I think they have some glaring issues, but it's hard to solve it, because it means kind of restructuring a team that you want to have intact because of their pre-existing synergy, but I don't know how long that's gonna expend.
You're talking about this pre-existing synergy, but it's gone basically.
At this point, it's starting.
It's gone basically, and they've basically waited too long. There's this quote from some football coach or he basically says something like, it's better to cut an year early than cut a year late.
Yeah.
And here we are with Seoul Dynasty, a team famous for cutting like 2 years, 3 years too late. Shoutouts to so many different players on Seoul Dynasty and Lunatic High. Yeah, so I legitimately think they should have kicked a bunch of these players, and there's still a bunch of good Koreans out there, so it doesn't make much sense to me.
They have the cream of the crop. Who doesn't want to play for Seoul?
Yeah, they are the most storied Korean team, basically.
Definitely.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to put on that jersey? I don't know anybody who would say no to that. Well, again, I don't know any of the Korean players, but I can't imagine that any of the Korean players would turn that down, especially with, playing for basically pennies and contenders and actually having, benefits and an actual salary in the Overwatch League. So
also shout out to Koma, who's basically done the same thing with SKT. That's a random dig, but I just think it's just hilarious because so many people were like, "Oh, don't change your roster after." No, you had to change that fucking roster after Worlds. That was pretty awful. Yeah, so if you're not going with Seoul, but you're certainly going with New York and London. What about the other?
New York, London. I would say Philly probably. Again, the caveat being like
Carpe
if
keeps
this meta is similar, that too. Like if he just doesn't have some sort of weird superstitious slump, I would say Philly for sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see. Okay, so LA Gladiators for sure. I actually wouldn't be surprised if I saw a team like Boston. I would say it's a toss-up then between Seoul, Boston, or oddly enough, Mayhem.
Okay.
Mayhem, yeah.
Because it's still not ult to Vic. You realize this, right? It's not truly ult to Vic.
For sure, it's definitely not ult to Vic, but I think he has the ult to Vic hero pool. And I think that just kind of proves that he has a knack for learning things really quickly, and he has a good mind for the game. So if it just happens that they surge really hard and Logix plays up to his potential, they somehow fit Saya player and Zappas in, and Tavik can just run amok on Sombra, I wouldn't be surprised to see them up there.
Okay.
Maybe Awesome Guy comes in and fissures this team. I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. It wouldn't be the first time a Korean main tank comes in and brings a bottom 8 team.
But Fisher had the entire revenge story. Like somebody needs to screw over Awesome Guy first for it to truly work.
Well, he comes from old LW, so you can still kind of bring up that narrative of like, he's an LW player.
Nobody remembers you, man. But yes, okay, I guess maybe he just has revenge on the mind against all Koreans. So
there you go.
Yeah. All right. One last prediction. Basically, end of stage 1, you're like, yes, Fleta is the one true god. It wasn't Jonak. How do you feel about that prediction after stage 2 is finished?
So, when you make predictions, I feel like you have to operate with what you know.
Yes, absolutely. It's not even a problem. It's not even a problem with predicting Fleta, because straight up he was like top 2.
Hey, it was really, really good, right? And you had everybody like, oh, there's not enough time. It's like, have you seen there's 4 seasons of Apex?
Yeah.
Like, he was dominating on Flash Lux and they couldn't win a map.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it sucks to see that he isn't, the same player that he was in stage 1. Was he good in stage 2? Yeah, he was all right. I would say he was, a little bit above average, but it wasn't necessarily anything that, touches his potential to be, one of the greater players in the league, if not one of the better players.
Yeah.
But in terms of just impactful players, it's kind of a toss-up for me.
Yeah, because here's my theory for Fleta. Basically, this was a man who should have stayed a little bit longer in Flash Lux, truly learned what it means to play 1v11 or 1v12 or 1v13, depending on if you want to count the coaches or not. Now,
sure.
Basically, what Fleta should have done was stay there a little bit longer, truly grind it out through hell, because he needed that experience. Because it turns out Lunatic High is like a Neo Flash Lux in a not so extreme, but certainly an iteration of it.
Sure. I guess, you know, he achieves enlightenment, you know, with one more year of Flash Lex training.
Yeah, man.
It's possible.
Happened to Nico.
It's
Happening
true.
to
It's
Simple.
true. It's true.
Uh, it never happened to Faker, but it's happening to Faker in a sense. It happened to Faker certainly at Worlds.
Is AskKT becoming the Flash Lux of LCK?
Listen, I don't actually know enough about League of Legends to give you that answer. I just think it's fucking hilarious that like basically they like crutched on this guy for so long and like aren't like helping him with roster moves. I just think it's like hilarious. So,
but if I had to give a prediction, you know, a player to keep your eye on, or you know, best player,
is it going to be
barring
Carpe?
any? It could. I would say it could be
Libero?
No,
Of course not. Right?
Sadly
He's
enough.
not even the best player on his team. Sadly,
No, yeah. I think he has his own set of skills that make him very, very dangerous, but I wouldn't say that he's like
I'll put it this way: he's like
performer.
he's the best Swiss Army knife of the
Exactly.
entire
Yeah,
league.
yeah. Exactly. He really is. He is like the best like flex player that you could ever have because I mean, outside of maybe Hawksall,
Mm-hmm.
but then again, you have to pry him away from Runaway.
Rest in peace.
I'll say like anyone between Jonak, Gesture, or maybe Birdring, maybe Prophet. Carpe, he's up there. I got to see a little bit more of that same playoff performance coming into. I'll say Carpe too.
Okay.
Any of those 5 players. It's really hard to peg
Wait,
anybody down.
which 5? Fleta.
So, not Fleta.
Okay, not Fleta.
Gesture, Jonak,
Prophet.
Birdring, Carpe.
So you,
I would say those are like my 5 to watch.
so you wouldn't take.
Or like fantasy 5. If you want some fantasy advice, if you don't have these 5 players, you're fucking up.
What about Fisher then?
Yeah. It's hard for me to give it to main tank players because of there's legitimately almost no parity in what they play.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, okay, yeah, you're a sick Winston, but like, can you play Orisa? I don't know. Because you never actually have to play it. Can you play Reinhardt? Well, you never actually have to play it. You can if you want to, but I don't think you have to.
Mm-hmm.
There hasn't been like a meta recently that you've had to play, or there's been like a hard swap for main tanks that's really gonna like push like the good main tanks up and really make the kind of bad main tanks even worse.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I want to see Fisher in like a Ryan meta because we've seen Gesture play Orisa to a pretty decent level. We've seen his Ryan. It actually goes toe to toe with Fraggy. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I want to see what else Fisher can do. But you know, if I had to give it to him, yeah, I would say he's like somewhere within the next 6 to 10 placings for sure.
Oh, yeah, there's actually one last thing I'll ask. This is literally the last thing. Okay, just keep adding on things, but basically,
No big deal.
Slasher was like Slasher the journalist, I assume.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure because he retired at some point, lost everything, came back.
Sure.
Or some crazy shit like that. But basically, he says like there's like 150 players coming into Overwatch League or some shit. Like
Really?
I forget the exact quote, but basically there's like a lot of them coming in that are being hired by the Overwatch League teams. And I checked the transfer window, like it ends like end of stage 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there going to be another the one like architect among all these different players from what you've seen?
I haven't seen anyone yet, and I'm struggling to think of anybody who's like next level. I think there's some serious like upgrades that you could get from Korea in particular.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who's like Fleta level or like even potentially architect level, maybe there's a flex. I think he plays flex DPS now. Bazzi, I think he plays for 7,
Mm-hmm.
the Korean contenders team. He's had some pretty dominant performances on hit scan, and now he's actually playing. If I remembering correctly, he's actually playing flex support now. So you have someone who's very similar to Kareev,
Mm-hmm.
and if you build a team around him, he could potentially be very destructive.
Okay.
Maybe him or there's a few main tank players. I've always been pretty high on No Smite. He played for X6, if you remember that team,
Yeah.
and like Apex. I would say those two would be some potential upgrades for some of these Overwatch League teams, but like Golden Child level, it's hard to say. There's really nobody that stands out.
All right. Okay. That should end it for this time. You got any shout outs?
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to sit and chat. I love doing these. These are definitely up there in terms of shows that I do. Follow me on Twitter if you want to read my garbage or watch my silly videos. But other than that, yeah, thanks for having me on, and hope we do some of these more.
Sure. And shout out to Fuel for literally writing this article in a way. And shout out to all the other writers who decided not to write it. It's like literally copy paste.
It just writes itself. Yeah.
All right. See you guys later.